Hello, and welcome to the Read the Bible podcast. This is a resource from Imago Dei Church. I'm your host, Daniel Jansen. Everyone calls me DJ. And I'm here with my wife, Crista. Crista, what's up, babe? How you doing?
Doing good.
Yeah?
Yeah, doing good.
We're here today to kick off the month of March and to take people deeper into the scriptures. Our reading plan is our podcast is all about how we can help people read the Bible deeper, to understand what's going on in the scriptures. And we partner it with a Bible reading plan, which you can find at Imago Dei Church's website, imagodei.church. You can go to the Read the Bible tab, and you can find our plan that every month we pick a new book of the Bible and we dig deeper into that book so that we can read and unfold it. We're in the month of March now.
Yeah.
So real quick before we get into that, Crista, month of March.
Yes.
What are you looking forward to in the month of March? What's something that you're hyped about?
Well, there's a lot of things happening.
There's a lot of things happening.
March
You only
for
pick
us,
one.
at least. I can only pick one.
Or two.
Okay. Well, for one thing, our oldest daughter is turning 11 this month. So that's exciting. And she has chosen to do an escape room for her birthday
like
party.
mother, like daughter.
Which I'm very excited about because I get to go with her. And I love escape rooms as well.
So low-key, Krista's favorite thing in the world is an escape room.
Yeah.
It's like
DJ kids escape rooms, maybe.
But then if we can do an escape room with you, that's like,
oh, it's the best.
That's the best.
Yeah. No, I love escape rooms.
What is it about an escape room that hypes you up?
I think I don't know. It's the feeling like I have to like use there's the competition.
You're competitive. Yeah.
I'm a competitive. And so like I can beat this room and always wanting to like get a good time. Not just if you don't know what escape room is, you're put in a room with other people and you have to solve clues, puzzles, and riddles to escape the room. And you have an hour to do this in. And so I'm like, not only do I want to do it in under an hour, but I also want to like have a good time. So I'm always like, okay, what's the best time of this room? And what is the leaderboard on this room? Like, can I be in that like range of like, the fastest people? So I love that competition aspect. I like being able to use my brains because I'm not the most athletic person. So although I am super competitive, I'm not athletic, and that has led to a very frustrating life for me. And so an escape room is like, okay, I can do this. I can use my brains and I can solve this. And then you get to do it with your friends. You get to do it with people and you're a team and you're not like you're working together. And so the suspense and then the themes are fun. Every room has a different theme. And so
I was thinking
those are super fun.
I was thinking as you were sharing, if you don't know Crista, she's a major introvert, actually. I mean, people don't always know that about her because she is very outgoing and but big time introvert.
I'm a huge introvert.
And I was just thinking like, you're such an introvert that your favorite thing to do is to be locked in a room with people and figure out how can I get out of here as soon as possible.
Well, when I do it, then I get to pick like my friends. It's like, no, let's do this together. The worst is when you do an escape room with strangers. That is the worst thing in the world. Yeah.
Well,
so that's one of the things I'm looking forward to is
awesome.
doing an escape room with my daughter and her other 10 and 11-year-old friends.
That's so good. That's so good. Anyway, okay, so I'm happy for that for you. And then the other thing that we're doing in March is reading 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
So that's our book for the month. We did 1 Samuel last year.
We did.
Right? Okay. And so we did 1 Samuel last year, and we're picking up 2 Samuel. We just finished, if you're joining the Bible reading plan, we did the prison letters of Paul in the month of February. So we read Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon, these short letters in the New Testament, Paul. And now we are in the Old Testament in 2 Samuel. And we designed it this way for a couple reasons. One, we want you to be able to hop into the reading plan whenever you like to never give up.
Right.
Or that every month starts over.
Right. Every month is a new start.
Exactly. So. Sometimes you fall behind and you feel guilty and I can never catch up. But literally every month we start over. So you can always step back in. And then we bounce back and forth between the Old Testament and the New Testament and different types of literature, which we'll get into in a second. It's different types of the Bible or parts of the Bible so that we get a comprehensive experience of reading God's word and letting it impact us. I was sharing with you before we started recording I haven't read you put together the notes for Second Samuel this month, so I haven't read Second Samuel yet, and I had to confess, I was like, I think this is a book of the Bible that I am probably one of the least familiar with out of most of the books in the Bible. We read through the Bible, like the whole Bible in a year in 2023. That was probably the last time I read Second Samuel was 2023. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to come in a little like fresh on some of this. So I'm excited to interview you, Krista, as you've been diving into Second Samuel. So you can help orient us and help us as we go on this journey. Yeah. So why don't you just help us just out the gate, get started? Like, what type of literature is Second Samuel? Like what can we expect in terms of like the way that it's written, and how does that change how we would kind of approach it?
Yeah. So if you are unaware, the Bible is written in, it is one cohesive book and story, all about God's creation of the world, his redemption of the world, and eventually his restoration of the world. But it is written in different literary genres. And so just like we have in life outside of the Bible, we have historical fiction, or we have romance, or you have these different genres, and it's the same with the Bible. And so that affects the way that you come and approach a book that you're reading. So if I was going to go to a rom-com and I came in expecting a murder mystery, I would be very thrown off by everyone laughing, or like that would be like very jarring. So anyways, all that is to say is that Second Samuel is what we call, it's what an historical narrative, and it's exactly what it says. It is narrating historical events, in this case of the nation of Israel. And so these are true stories and true accounts of what happened in the nation of Israel. And when we read historical narrative, what's really helpful, we mentioned this last year when we think we did First Samuel, but I think it's Christy Anna Weeble. She writes this in her book on scriptural genres, that when you read historical narrative, they're intended to be both a mirror and a window. And so a mirror is that we can read these stories of different people's lives, and we can see maybe a reflection of ourselves, of how we respond or how we would act, or like they could be like little mirrors or little pictures of us. Or it could also be a window, a lens through which we can watch the lives of others, and we can learn from their mistakes or from their successes, like that we can see, oh, there's something that I can learn from them as I'm watching you and how you lived and how you interacted with God that I can take for myself. But the main thing we want to look for when reading historical narrative is, how do these stories fit into the big story of what God is doing throughout history and throughout all of Scripture? And how does it point to our great need for Jesus and for a Savior? So just a gentle reminder for those of you who did read with us last month. We did the prison letters last month. The great thing about reading an epistle, a letter, is that every day you read, there is just like, it's almost like a fire hose of like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Like there's immediate application and like nuggets of like, wow, like, like live a life worthy of the gospel, and you are no longer sons of disobedience. And like every day there's something that you're just like, oh, I feel like this is amazing. Historical narratives are a slow burn. They're a slow payoff. And so really, you're going to have readings this month where you're like, okay, I just read about a battle. Like, what does that mean? Or what do I do? But keep in mind, you're looking for, what is this teaching you? Like, what is this whole book teaching you? What are you getting from the entire book, not just each individual day's reading? So just kind of be patient as you read through for that payoff.
Yeah, there's more of a comprehensive like payoff, as we say. Whereas there might be moments and verses, and but there's the quotable verses per chapter
right. far fewer. Yeah.
But it's more at the end in the whole, where you sit there and you reflect and you're like, oh, God's teaching or revealing these certain truths. One thing I would just add on the genre piece that I remember learning that was really important for me was, we talk about historical narrative, but the historical narratives in the Bible are not mere histories. They are histories with an agenda.
Yeah.
And I think because for me as a evangelical Christian who believes in the inerrancy of Scripture, that every word is true, and like when I say that it has an agenda, there's a part of me that's like, whoa, I want to like defend that. I'd be like, no, it's not that, because I see that as almost like a bad thing. But the reality is, no, it totally has an agenda, and it's God's agenda.
That's right.
And so it's not the purpose of 2 Samuel, and for that matter, 1st and 2nd Kings, Chronicles, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the purpose of these books is not to just tell you Israel's history.
Right.
There's things from history that it doesn't talk about, because the point is not to tell you,
right.
It's to give, like, in a sense, God's lens on history,
Right.
and to help us understand God's activity in the world.
Right.
And so it's not just American history or world history, or which, I mean, we need a whole other rabbit trail of like, are there agendas and how we put those things together. But this is God's organization of that. Yeah,
absolutely. That's
so
good,
then, so then taking that, Krista, and already I have some questions I want to get into on that. But one other kind of just like quick question is then, okay, that historical context. So when this was written, like who wrote it, like why was it written, and who was the intended audience, at least, originally?
Yeah. So the author of 1st and 2nd Samuel. So 1st and 2nd Samuel were intended to be read as a set. So if I talk about throw 1st in with it, that's because they were written together. But the author of these books is unknown, so we don't know if it was a singular author or a couple different authors who wrote the books, but they were written for the nation of Israel. And the combined books together, they tell the story of the establishment of Israel's monarchy. So 1 Samuel, if you read with us last year, kicks off with the nation of Israel begging God for a king. And so they anoint and appoint Saul as king. But we quickly learn that Saul is a ruler and a king who does not care about God. And so then there's David and his monarchy. So 1 Samuel is primarily about Saul's reign, and 2 Samuel is primarily about King David's reign. But the big thing that that the author is trying to illustrate is that, to what you were saying, DJ, is that this is God's history, and like this is God establishing his nation. And so, that's kind of where we're coming from.
So you kind of already got this a little bit, but catch us up, right? So you have, this is 2 Samuel, but it's actually just
it's a continuation.
It's just Samuel.
Yes.
And so 1st and 2nd Samuel is like part 1, part 2.
Right.
It's Act 1, Act 2.
Right.
It's one
whole
complete story. So kind of just help us. You already kind of alluded a little bit, but catch us up. Like, what should we know?
Yeah.
Starting 2 Samuel.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, to remind you, if you read last year, and if you didn't, then let me give you kind of the highlight reel, right, of 1 Samuel. So in 1 Samuel, you have the nation of Israel. They are in the promised land, the land of Canaan, and this is where God has brought them out of the land of Egypt through 40 years of the wilderness, and now they have conquered the other nations that were in this land, and now they are there, and they are living. And the Israelites are looking at these other nations, and they are complaining to God because they don't have a human king. And God is like, well, I'm your king. But they're like, well, you're not good enough. We want a human one. So God's like, all right, I'll give you what you asked for. But it's going to be a problem for you, just so you know. So God establishes, he anoints Saul to be the first king of Israel. And very quickly, again, it becomes apparent that Saul is not a man who cares about the things of God, that throughout his reign, he continues to disregard the word of the Lord, to disregard the prophet Samuel, who is God's appointed spokesperson for the nation of Israel. And he doesn't walk in the ways of the Lord. And so as a result of that, God tells Samuel, hey, you know what? Saul, he is not listening. He's not obeying. Like, this is not the man I want to lead my people. And so he has Samuel anoint a young boy, shepherd boy named David, to be the next king of Israel. And so during 1 Samuel, David actually He defeats Goliath, which many people, you know that common story. And as he grows and becomes a man, he is a mighty warrior, and he leads the army of Israel into battle and has great victories. And the nation of Israel just loves David because he's a hero, and God is with him. And the big thing of the books is that God requires total and complete obedience from his king. And so he didn't get that with Saul. And so God is exalting and blessing everything that David touches. And this creates a jealousy in Saul, where Saul is actually pursuing to kill David. David's in hiding, and he's just like wicked with jealousy, wants David dead. And then finally, 1 Samuel ends with David in hiding, and Saul and his son Jonathan are killed in battle.
And that's right where 2 Samuel picks up, is David receiving the news
that Saul and his son Jonathan, Jonathan was David's best friend, have been killed.
That they've been killed, and takes us from there. So again, it's one complete story. So as we step into 2 Samuel, what are just some of those key themes? What are those things that we can expect to find as we read it? What are some things that we should maybe be on the lookout for, themes that we should expect to see? You've already kind of mentioned a little bit about like the king and righteousness and obedience and some of that, but like take us maybe a little deeper into that. Like, what should we expect to find?
Yeah, so kind of key themes to look for is, even though Saul is dead in 2 Samuel, is that really there is this continual comparison between David and Saul, like the household of David, the household of Saul. Really the comparison of David to other earthly men in power or fighting for power. But the author just wants to keep highlighting for the readers that David is God's man. Like, this is a guy who has a heart after God's own heart. That's the phrase used in 1 Samuel. And that David is the one that God has chosen. David is the one that God loves. David is the one that God is establishing, and he is different than Saul. He is different than other men in power, because he is the one who communes with God, who listens to God, who hears from God, who submits himself to God. He's a man after God's own heart. And so you're just going to keep seeing this like compare and contrast continually throughout 2 Samuel. Then the second theme you're really going to see, this is the biggest one, is just God's sovereignty. It is very clear, as the author writes, God did this. So David did this, but God. Or so-and-so did this, but God was really doing this. Like that God is the one who is orchestrating men's hearts. God is the one who is really behind all the political powers and battles and victories. God is the one who is caring for his nation. And so the real power at work is not human power at all, but you're just going to see God's sovereignty and his power at work. And then the last thing I think is just worth highlighting is in 2 Samuel, the first couple chapters are just David becoming king, like his, coming to the throne. But there's this huge turning point in chapter 7.
Yes, chapter 7 is super key.
Yeah. And so in chapter 7, there's this moment where David, he has his palace and his house, and he's kind of lamenting. He's like, gosh, like I have this amazing palace. I am a king. Like, I can't believe how blessed I am. Like, how is it that I have this home and there's not a home for God? Like I'm going to build a home for the Ark of the Covenant. I'm going to build you a house, God. Like, like this isn't fair that I have all these things and you don't. And God pretty much tells David, like, that's nice, David, but no, like you can't confine me to a house. Like that's not what you're going to do. But God makes a promise. He makes a covenant with David. And this is really huge in Israel's history, but this is huge in biblical history, is that God promises David that he is going to establish an enduring dynasty through his family, that your family is going to have a monarchy, an everlasting kingdom. And that line of David eventually will bring us to Jesus Christ, to the King of Kings and the King of the world.
Yes, let me stop you there and just kind of read this moment. So you have in chapter 7, like you said, David says, I dwell in the house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells in a tent, and so he's like, I need to build God a house. And God says, would you build me a house to dwell in?
Yeah, like nice try, David.
Nice to use that. Like, I'm gonna, and you're gonna serve me. Like
Right.
you're gonna. It's like no, and this is God's sovereignty. Like I am the Lord. Really clearly, like I am the actor. But then in that, I am the provider and the blesser and the one who, and so he goes and he makes this covenant and this promise. And it's verse 16 that it kind of builds. And he says, your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. And I think this is one of those key places where understanding the context really matters, because 1st and 2nd Samuel are written, but like by the time they're actually like written and read, David is gone. Right? I'm just thinking about how it takes to write something. It's not like this isn't being written and distributed while it's unfolding. It's a history of what happened.
Right.
And so you have in the immediate aftermath of David, you have like a divided kingdom that's coming into play. You have that's First Kings is what you'll find there is you have a kingdom that's at war and a kingdom that's against itself, and you have all this sorts of like kind of confusion about
and a lot of people fighting for power.
Exactly. And part of the message is saying, no, God has a plan and he's made a covenant and he's going to fulfill his covenant. And what's interesting is a couple different things then is one, and you already mentioned this, as we get further into history and the nation of Israel gets eventually they're enslaved and they're marginalized and they lose all their power. Like this covenant, this hope, this promise takes on even greater significance because it's like, okay, we've blown it, right. And God, like, is there any hope? And they're looking for a king from the line of David. And Jesus is born in the line of David, and Matthew's genealogy in Matthew chapter 1 makes that like very explicit and clear. And there's different points in the Gospels that make that point very, very clear that this is the hope and it's in this line and God has been faithful to his promise. But the other thing, and maybe this takes us back into 2 Samuel, is whereas in 1 Samuel, David is kind of idealized.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't really think David makes any mistakes in 1 Samuel. I mean, I have to go back and like check my notes, so to speak. But like when I think of David in 1 Samuel, he's pure of heart. I mean, he's kind of like, he is a Christ figure in many ways.
The model child.
The model
child.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
and
he's
then
David.
in 2 Samuel, this promise is made to David. And yet, pretty much from that point on, it's not that he's a complete failure. He does some right things, but definitely some questionable things. And then definitely, at least in 2 points, outright blatant sin that he participates in. And so David's shine fades pretty significantly. And he's not, so yes, there's this promise to David, but it's not David who's like able to hold it together, which I think is just an interesting reality. Like that's part of how the Bible works. It's not until Jesus that we actually have that hope. So take us maybe into, because I think that might be something that surprises people. I think when we think David, we think Goliath, we think noble, we think all these sorts of things. And 2 Samuel has a little bit of a different
angle.
Yeah,
a different part of his life.
So tell us about David.
Yeah. So
I think that'll surprise people.
Yeah, so it is interesting. And as you read 2 Samuel, you'll notice the first chapters are, again, establishing him as the king. And you continue to see him as the golden boy. Like he is, just above and beyond every other man and kingdom. And he is like, he's God's beloved. And the pinnacle, of course, being what we just talked about, chapter 7, where there's this covenant with God. And God's like, no, you're going to have an everlasting kingdom. And then pretty much not too soon after that, David really kind of starts to unravel. He loses his shine a lot. And the biggest surprise is in chapter 10, where we encounter David with Bathsheba. Oh, not chapter 10, 11. David and Bathsheba. And David, it just has this description that David is on the roof. He is outside when the time when all the kings go to war. And so he has his men are out at war, but he is, for whatever reason, David, the mighty warrior, decides to stay home this time. And he's home on the roof, and he sees a woman, Bathsheba, bathing on her roof, and he sees her and he wants her. And so he sends for her, and she comes, and he sleeps with her, and she becomes pregnant. Now, the crazy thing is that Bathsheba's husband Uriah is actually one of David's mighty men, and he is out leading the Israelites in battle. He is a valiant soldier, a loyal man to the nation of Israel and to David. And so Bathsheba sends word to David, hey, I'm pregnant. And David has this brilliant idea to cover up his sin. So he calls Uriah home from battle, gets him drunk, sends him home, like, hey, go enjoy your wife, you know. And Uriah, even in his drunkenness, is like, how can I go and do this when my men are still out in the field? Like, I'm not. And he doesn't even go into his own household, but he sleeps on the front porch pretty much of his house. So David has no way to cover his sin. And so he sends word to Joab, who is leading his army. Hey, put Uriah in the heaviest battle where the archers are, and arranges to have him killed. So he has Uriah murdered and killed, and then he takes Bathsheba as his own wife. And so you have David, who up until this point has been the man after God's own heart, has done everything that God has asked him to do. God has blessed him and been with him. And then he commits sexual adultery, and he murder, and he thinks he gets away with it.
Yeah. So it means it's like kind of like, whoa, like it's cowardice. It's like for a king, it's dishonor at every turn. So it's like it's the he's not the one out at war, like you pointed out. There's with Bathsheba, it's at minimum adultery. You know, I mean, there's some conversation now as you understand like the power dynamics at play.
Who knows
you know,
that
was it consensual? And I mean,
exactly.
So like what agency did Bathsheba have? You don't want to go too deep into that. I think that's a conversation I see happening a lot in social media and stuff. I think the scripture is pointing, doesn't give us all the play-by-play on that. I think there's some things that we can kind of take like that are pretty obvious. There is obviously like a power dynamic that is at play, and he's the king, and he's like, I think the point that we should walk away with is he is abusing his authority as king.
Right.
He is dishonoring the kingdom. He is acting shamefully, wickedly, and then the dishonor of the dishonor part is really shown with Uriah, the husband, where he's like, you know, trying to get him to kind of cover his shame, and his honor won't let him cover his shame, because it's like he is acting honorably at every turn. And so David goes to the lowest level and just kills him off.
Right.
And so, he gets away with it. And then God is sovereign, as you pointed out earlier. God sees, like God knows. And in chapter 12, he sends the prophet Nathan
to confront him. Yeah, I think just one of the most chilling verses in 2 Samuel, at the end of 11, it says, you know, Uriah is dead. 11:27. When the morning was over, David sent and brought Bathsheba to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. And it says, but the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. And it's just like, man, David thinks he is free and clean and able to enjoy Bathsheba and this child. But then there's like, no, like God saw, and what he did displeased the Lord. And so the Lord sends the prophet Nathan to David, and Nathan confronts David about his sin by kind of telling this tale and this story of a wealthy man who has plenty of livestock and herds, but that he decides to kill a poor man's single sheep for a feast. And David is like enraged at the injustice, and how could this person, you know, do such a thing? He should be put to death. And then Nathan's like, you know, well, surprise, it's you, David. You are the man. You are the man. And so, and so as punishment, as a consequence of this sin, David's child dies. The son born to Bathsheba dies, and God tells David that there will be turmoil in his household from that point on. And so the covenant that God made with David is not void, but that there will not be peace in your household. That now there is going to be a turmoil and dissension and division in your home. Yeah.
And that's what we see unfold from that point is you see family strife. Yeah. I see in your note on here, Crista, you said, great king, awful father.
Yes, that is David.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see that. And so moving on from that, I mean, David has several children, but his son,
Absalom.
Amnon rapes his sister, Tamar. And then David finds out about it and doesn't do anything about it. He's heartbroken, but he doesn't do anything about it. So then his other son Absalom, then he's furious about it. So he decides he kills his brother. Absalom kills his brother. David finds out. He doesn't do anything about it. And he's just kind of this passive dad who's like, whoa, this is like, you guys, this is
family
so
drama,
hard.
like,
Yeah,
nice.
like, calm down. But he doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
He doesn't intervene. And yet as a king, you see his wisdom and his activity in war and like his strategy, but within his own home. Just not the best dad. Does not know how to handle his own home.
Well, and I mean, and eventually that leads to strife with Absalom, and Absalom's killed, and there's a whole drama that unfolds from there.
Right, where his son tries to forms a conspiracy against David and actually tries to have his father killed and to take over his throne.
So there's a lot of like political drama then within Second Samuel, and you're really seeing I think what you're seeing is how human kings are unable to hold that place.
Yeah.
You know? And it makes you, and yet God has made this promise. And so what you're seeing is God's faithfulness to his promise, because he's still faithful to David.
Right.
Even in the midst of the unfaithfulness and the kind of the, at best, questionable decision making.
Right.
That happens. And even 2 Samuel ends on a bit of a tragic note as David sins again. He does a census, which doesn't sound as dramatic as adultery, rape, and murder, but it's not trusting the Lord, and he counts his men, he counts his people, he counts and kind of like beefs up his army, and like rests in his own strength, and God is not pleased with that either. And so I don't know, Crista, taking all this together, like what are some of your takeaways? And maybe just like I'm because I know your heart, like what do you love about that? You know what I mean? Like what is it that you're kind of like walking away with?
So one of the biggest things that I was walking away with from this book is you just see the disappointment as a reader, you're like, oh, David, come on. Like, is there no one good? And you're like, yeah, no, actually that's the point. No, none are righteous. No, not one, right? That all sin and fall short. And what I love about this is that specifically in the sin with Bathsheba and Uriah, when David is confronted, that he cries out that he has sinned against God. And even if you look at Psalm 51, this is David's prayer and his cry that he writes after this sin. And he says, Lord, like, against you and you only have I sinned. And he says, take not your presence from me. And as you read 2 Samuel, the rest of 2 Samuel after Bathsheba is just David reaping the consequences of his sin. There's his son dies. There is death and blood and conspiracy and drama in his home. He is a apathetic father. He just it's just ugly. It's not his best side. Yet in that you see there are consequences for sin, but the presence of God is still with him. Like you still see that he asks of the Lord and the Lord speaks to him, and he communes with God even still. And so though there's consequences, there's not an absence of God's presence, and that God's faithfulness to his promise to David, to be with him and to be that enduring dynasty, like that doesn't cease because of his sins. It's because that promise was based on God's faithfulness and his character. So I just love seeing this, kind of looking, using those mirror and the window thing like we talked about earlier. As I use this as a window, I look at David's life and I find courage and comfort in the fact of, like, even if I screw up my whole life, like even if I fall apart and I do the dumbest things and the most wicked and horrible things, like, and even if I have to live with the consequences of those mistakes and those sins, yet God will not take his presence from me. Yeah. And if I have God's presence and his faith, like, God will be faithful to his word and he will be near to me. And that is enough. And that was enough for David. And that's enough for me. Yeah.
Oh, so. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I love what you did there as you're reflecting on that is also, you mentioned Psalm 51.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be one thing that I would encourage people with is when you read the Psalms,
Mm-hmm.
often in the Psalms, it'll have like little scripts at the superscripts in the Psalm that give context, like when David was running from Absalom, or when, you know what I mean? Like when after Psalm 51 says like after David had sinned with Bathsheba, like there's these little superscripts in the Psalms that David wrote. Not all of them have this, but many of them do. And it's really kind of a fun Bible exercise to go back and read in 1st and 2nd Samuel what was happening that then led to David writing that song or that poem or that prayer. And so that's just a little kind of like knowledge thing for you to have and maybe to go read some of the Psalms and cross-reference them with Samuel, 1st or 2nd Samuel, and see what was happening that led to this. Because then we can kind of live in that poem a little bit and make that our own prayer.
Yeah.
You know, we mentioned 2 Samuel 7 as being, you know, kind of like the highlight point or the kind of the climax moment. But I actually don't know if that's entirely true. I think it's the climax moment in redemption history. So if I'm thinking Genesis to Revelation, 2 Samuel 7 is the highlight point. It's kind of one of these kind of key, like, peak moments that then a lot unfolds from there throughout the rest of the Bible. But if I were to highlight like a highlight or peak moment in Samuel as a whole, it would probably be 2 Samuel 22, which is the poem or the song,
It's a psalm,
the song that David writes, because that is kind of the song. So it all builds, and things unfold. And then chapter 22 is a song. And I mean, just again, a Bible reading kind of tip. If you see a song in the middle of something that's not songs, you should probably pay attention to the song. Like it's like there's a different thing that's happening there. It's not a musical. You know what I mean? So if there's a song, you should really pay attention to it. Tell us about chapter 22 and what we find there and what role that plays and how we understand 1st and 2nd Samuel.
Yeah, so 2 Samuel 22 is a song. It's a song of deliverance. And this is a song that David wrote after it says, after the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. And kind of a fun fact, this is actually the same as Psalm 18. So if you read Psalm 18, you will find these same words as 2 Samuel 22. But when you read my hope as you get to the end of 2 Samuel and you get to Psalm 22, I mean, it is just like a guttural like cry of like thanksgiving and praise to the Lord. Like when you think of all of David's life, when you look at all that he went through of being anointed as a shepherd boy, to defeating Goliath, to leading the Israelites in battle, to running for his life from Saul, from his own son, all of the sin and the brokenness, and then there's this song right at the end, and verses 26. Actually, I'll read through 31. I think these are just like really help capture the theme of both the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. And David writes, "With the merciful, you show yourself merciful. With the blameless man, you show yourself blameless. With the purified, you deal purely. And with the crooked, you make yourself seem torturous. You save a humble people, but your eyes are on the haughty and bring them down. For you are a lamp, O Lord, and my God lightens my darkness. For by you I can run against a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. This God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord proves true. He is a shield for all those who take refuge in him." And I think that is just so beautiful, and it really helps bring home what you read in these books of Samuel, is that with the merciful, God is merciful. And with the blameless, God shows himself blameless, but he does tear down the haughty. He will bring down the proud and those who are set themselves against the Lord. Like, he will not stand for that. But God is a light in David's darkness, and he's a refuge to those who take refuge in him, like as he has been for all of David's life. And so you just read this song at the end of this book, and you're like, I could see it. Like, I see exactly what David's talking about, because I just read about, his whole
Yeah.
life, and I've seen how God has done that and
Yeah.
has been that.
And that's at the end of this. It's you can find that also in Psalm 18. It's almost word for word.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, probably any differences are just in where it's like how people would find that or do that. But the what I love about that psalm or that song is it describes a king encompassed by the cords of death, rewarded for his righteousness, for whom foreigners and nations come and bow before, who is exalted above all other kings and has been given the keys of salvation. And it's like Jesus is the true and better David in that sense, where you see this journey of David and the promises made to David, and he's holding on to these truths about God and the promises made to him, and we see those like partially lived out in his life. He experiences that grace and kindness, but Jesus is the true righteous king who is encompassed by the cords of death, who is given the reward of salvation and the exaltation, and the nations come to him. And it's like that song here that captures this story is like perfectly given in the gospel in Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, thanks, Crista, for leading us in there. I'm excited for people to read 2 Samuel. Like you said, it's a bit more of a slow burn, and I encourage people to like have the story just sit with them and to rest and to be confused by the confusing parts. That's fine, or to not feel like you're failing if you don't have resolution on every paragraph and chapter, but actually just to hold that whole story together and find this just beautiful picture of God's faithfulness, his call to obedience, the righteousness of a king and the unrighteousness of a king, and how God is able to work in those things and what he's ultimately working out in history.
Yeah, so good.
And I think the only resource that we talked about was just there's the For You series. So if you ever go on like Amazon or Google or whatever, you search the Bible for you and just so look up 2 Samuel for you. Generally speaking, it's a really good series, and I think Tim Chester wrote this one.
He did, yeah.
So
wrote that one.
I don't think that you and I have interacted with that book too much, but Tim Chester, I always enjoy what he writes. So Tim Chester, 2 Samuel for you would be a good resource if you want something to partner with your reading. Yeah. But other than that, anything else?
I don't think so. I think that's great.
All right.
Enjoy.
I love it. All right. Well, until next time, love you guys, and grace and peace.